We're working towards 4 tournament dates at the moment, such as the nature of this virus at the moment and the unpredictability, and just what we're a very small ship on a very big ocean, so what decisions are made around the world will impact what we do. So we're having to be a lot more nimble than we've been in the past. So we've got a preferred date, we've got a date we are working towards, but we can't set that in stone. A lot of it's going to depend on calendar flow from the tennis world. A lot of it's going to depend on what decisions other nations make in terms of, it's not just about getting players here, it's about getting them home as well. And then obviously what decisions New Zealand has around quarantine and level 1 versus level 4, all of those different scenarios for us.
There was a domestic schedule which was actually ready to go back in March, and I think they're up to version 24 or 5 of that now. So it's been, the people who have gone through that at New Zealand Cricket have done an amazing job just to get us to this point in dealing with the uncertainty about domestic and international. And it still will probably change on the international one just because of border restrictions, quarantining, and how they sort of manage that. So it's definitely quite considerably later than it would be in normal circumstance, but everybody understands that's where we are and why it is what it is. So.
Yeah, look, we're working on plan B and C. Plan A is ABO. Plan B is maybe we just bring in a Taiwanese and Japanese team and we play, so we get some baseball going. Plan C is what? We'll just bring in our players and coaches. They're going to have to sit in a hotel for 3 weeks, and then, or 2 weeks, 14 days, and then we will look to have inter-squad scrimmage games coaching. So we're not giving up on this, but you've got to have plan B and C. The easy one we do is, we're not doing it, we'll pack up our tents and start again next year, but no one wants to do that.
I'm not saying yes to anything, but I'm sure as hell not saying no to anything. I think we have to just be really nimble. We've got, as I say, 4 dates that we're actively working on at the moment. That all 4 of those we think we can make work. We're certainly starting to get tight on a couple of those dates. But we have to be prepared to be nimble. We have to be prepared to, as I say, when decision X is made on the other side of the world tomorrow, we have to be ready to now go, okay, how does that impact us, and be ready to, I'm trying to think of what other word aside from pivot is, but how we now be agile in our response to that.
Everyone's been pretty helpful, but right now no one wants to bring in, no one wants to be bringing COVID into the country. So, at the end of the day, my sport's important, but when it's all said and done, there's 5 million other people that have got a piece of ownership in this whole COVID puzzle.
Compared to other sports, we might have a little bit of a head start in that they've got 3 separate campaigns to play for across the season, and that probably gives them extra motivation, and it's more difficult in terms of them focusing for each one. But in a situation like this, could be an advantage. If we lose 6 weeks, well, that could be one competition just gets put to one side, and they can then, right, let's focus on these. But it's going to be a challenge for our coaches about how they keep alongside those guys and keep, as I say, understanding where they're at and understanding how we can keep them tuned into this is what the season means for you guys and why we should still care and why we should still be fighting for whatever we've got left.
Good business and a good product coming into COVID. There's still a good business and a good product coming out of COVID. We're just going to have to make sure we're more resilient and more open to the things that were probably 5-year initiatives are now 5-week initiatives. And I think it's operating at that pace is those that do that well, I think will survive very well.
Kia ora, good people, and welcome to the future of Auckland sport. I'm Dean McLaughlin from United via Sport. It's a pleasure to be coming your way via YouTube and Facebook. When we started these webcasts on August the 4th, delving into the future of women's sport, our chief supporters, Regional Facilities Auckland and ATEED, were separate entities. Auckland was blissfully unaware that there would be another lockdown looming, and winter sport was coming to the pointy end of the season. Wow, what a difference a month makes. RFA and ATEED have merged. We've had to switch to doing remote Zoom entirely webcasts for community sport and high performance sport. We've had no community sport, zilch, zero. The Blues had their final game, a sellout, cancelled. The North-South game shifted from Eden Park down country, and the Auckland teams, the Magic and the Stars in the ANZ Championship, didn't get to have their final hurrah. So thank goodness we've still been able to watch the Warriors across the ditch as they strive valiantly to make the NRL top 8. So that's the amazing backdrop to being back here in the Herald Theatre to look at the future of professional sport in this cray-cray COVID environment. Today, in helping to unite Auckland via Sport, we're going to have insights from three of our key summer sports, picking the brains of a trio of real good sports. For tennis, we have ASB Classic Tournament Director Carl Budge, Auckland Cricket is represented by CEO Ian Laxon, and Auckland Tuatara boss Regan Wood is talking baseball. We also have a brilliant panel here on stage. Blues Chairman Don McKinnon, Warriors CEO Cameron George, and New Zealand Netball Players Association Executive Manager Steph Bond. So great practitioners doing a great job in their respective sports, and here they are. A brilliant cure for Monday-itis. It's Don at the far end, Cameron and Steph. Welcome, good people. Pleasure to have you here. Well, let's start with the COVID-19 impact. And given the profile of your sports, we know what your organisations have been through. Don, you had a sellout match at Eden Park curtailed, it's disappeared. How's that affected the Blues from, first of all, mentally, and then from a financial perspective?
Oh, I think mentally, Dean, I think it was a huge blow. There's no doubt the team was ready for a pretty extraordinary end to an extraordinary season, frankly. So I think they were incredibly disappointed. The fans were really let down. Financially, look, there's no denying it was a huge hit. We'd gone from financial oblivion, frankly, to Super Rugby Aotearoa. It had turned things around. That last game was going to set us up for 2021. So it was a huge blow, no doubt about that. But rugby's bouncing back. North-South game on Saturday was quite outstanding. So and 10 Blues players in the AB squad. So look, overall, far more positives than negatives out of a tough year.
Steph, turning to you, the two Auckland teams, the Mystics and the Stars, missed out on their final round game of the season. How gutting was that for them?
Oh, absolutely, I think at the start of the season we were able to have a competition and we were able to have it run, which was really great. And it was run out of Auckland Netball, and then all of a sudden we got this opportunity that franchises were able to have home games, and all of a sudden they got excited, fans were able to go, there was going to be gate takings again, sponsors were again happy. And then overnight, within 24 hours they had 2 matches that were cancelled. And it was really gutting, I think, and from a financial perspective, it's just like sport's a business, isn't it? And so I guess they're having to move through things like any other business has to try and make the most of it.
It was just fortunate that Netball New Zealand were able to continue the championship further down south. So
it was very fortunate. We were very lucky, actually, that the 2 top teams were already the top teams and we didn't have to wait for the last round, and we were able to take it to Invercargill and have a great final down there.
Cameron, we've seen the Warriors make an enormous sacrifice this season, and we're so proud of their efforts on the field, off the field. It must be frustrating not to be able to give them a man hug and support and a cuddle when they need it.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure about that. But look, from a club's perspective, we're very proud of the efforts and the sacrifices that the players and staff have undertaken this year in order for us to compete in the NRL. But collectively in New Zealand, what I've seen through all sports is a resilience and a passion and a commitment to get all sport up and running, and I think this country should be very proud of that, and all the leaders from various sports should be very proud of what they've undertaken this year, and we're a part of that. And thankfully we're still in the competition, and we're going okay. So it's not without its challenges, but either is anyone sitting around this table haven't experienced those this year. So we're just grateful that we're in a competition, playing and having some fun. Looking forward to getting them home though to their families.
What is going to be the long-term impact of COVID on professional sport here in Auckland?
Look, I think from our perspective, being an Australian competition, it's going to have a huge impact next year. As it stands now, the mid to long-term position we're going to have to take is planning to be based out of Australia again next year, unless something dramatic happens over the next couple of months. But that then, translates into commercial challenges. Obviously, our fan base is here. Our first priority is to be here and play in front of them, but outside of our control, the circumstances presented to us, I don't think will allow that. So that means we lose out on membership. Our commercial partners start to review their positions, and so on and so on. So from the Warriors' perspective, if it's not in New Zealand, it's going to have some major impacts on us for sure.
Don, Steph, your competitions have been able to have world-class domestic competitions, pivoted towards that. Is that going to be the sort of blueprint for next season?
Well, I think 90% likely for next season. I think, Cameron just talked about it, but there's so much uncertainty. It's an extraordinary time to be involved in trying to plan, elite sport, high-performance sport, when the season before Super Rugby Aotearoa, when we went from planning for 10 people at our first game of the Super Rugby Aotearoa to 43,000 in 6 days. I mean, that's how much you have to be ready to change. So, yeah, next year I'm sure there'll be more uncertainty if there's more lockdowns. The impact is huge. But at the moment, I think Super Rugby in itself, in its little bubble, will survive probably for one more year if it has to be domestic. But it's not sustainable in the long term. It's not a sustainable model commercially in the long term. We're a bit like the NRL in that regard. We need to be bigger. We need to be broader. We need to appeal to a greater range of sports sponsors, broadcasters. So, yeah, we can put the Band-Aid on for one more year and deliver something the crowds and the fans still love. But beyond that, it would start to get quite nervous.
Steph, are you in the same boat, do you think?
Yeah, well, we're a little bit lucky, I guess, because our competition is a domestic competition, so we're not relying on the international teams to arrive for our domestic competition. I guess from a national perspective and the Silver Ferns and that competition, absolutely we need, to get teams to New Zealand, and that's pivotal really to the finances at Netball New Zealand, and being able to get teams across the border and actually have them isolate and be in bubbles in New Zealand and be able to participate in New Zealand would be exceptional.
I think, Dean, just catching on that, I think, people, I don't think, quite appreciate international sport in New Zealand's on a bit of a knife edge at the moment. If rugby and cricket and netball in particular can't get international sport played in the last quarter of this year, the impact will flow right through into the domestic game. It will be, it'll be falling off a cliff. So it's a nerve-wracking time.
Mm-hmm. And I think, to put it in perspective, the international markets are worth over 100 million, aren't they, from a rugby, cricket and netball perspective, and that money not coming into New Zealand and the flow-on impacts of jobs, not just players' salaries, but also jobs to everyone who works in sport, is significant.
We'll have a chat about borders in a minute, but we're into spring. We're getting really close to focusing on summer sports. I've caught up with tennis, cricket and baseball in the last week to see how COVID is impacting on them.
We're working towards 4 tournament dates at the moment, such as the nature of this virus at the moment and the unpredictability.
There was a domestic schedule which was actually ready to go back in March, and I think they're up to version 24 or 5 of that now. So it's been, the people who have gone through that at New Zealand Cricket have done an amazing job just to get us to this point in dealing with the uncertainty.
Yeah, look, we're working on Plan B and C. Plan A is ABO. Plan B is maybe we just bring in a Taiwanese and Japanese team and we play, so we get some baseball going. Plan C is we'll just bring in our players and coaches. They're going to have to sit in a hotel for 3 weeks, and then or 2 week footing days, and then we will look to have inter-squad scrimmage games coaching.
It's definitely quite considerably later than it would be in normal circumstance, but everybody understands that's where we are and why it is what it is. So
it's not just about getting players here; it's about getting them home as well. And then obviously what decisions New Zealand has around quarantine and level 1 versus level 4, all of those different scenarios for us.
So we're not giving up on this, but you've got to have plan B and C. The easy one we do is, well, we're not doing it, we'll pack up our tents and start again next year, but no one wants to do that.
Compared to other sports, we might have a little bit of a head start in that they've got 3 separate campaigns to play for across the season, and that probably gives them extra motivation and it's more difficult in terms of them focusing for each one, but in a situation like this could be an advantage. If we lose 6 weeks, well, that could be one competition just gets put to one side and they can then, right, let's focus on these.
Everyone's been pretty helpful, but right now no one wants to bring in, no one wants to be bringing COVID into the country. So, at the end of the day, my sport's important, but when it's all said and done, there's 5 million other people that have got a piece of ownership in this whole COVID puzzle.
It seems all sports are facing the same COVID challenges, and it's encapsulated in one word: uncertainty. Just to recap, the ASB Tennis Classic is looking at 4 tournament options, not necessarily all in January. Could be brought forward, who knows. Cricket is up to its 25th domestic schedule iteration, and it's still not out yet. And baseball is juggling plans A, B and C. So, Cameron, I'll throw to you. Given sport is confronting the same issues, are you talking to each other?
Look, again, the uniqueness of our club, our sport, is we're the sole rugby league unit in New Zealand in an Australian competition. So, for us, it's just we're either going to be in New Zealand or Australia. So we have 2 options we're planning for, preference being here. But, we're working with the NRL, other clubs. If we're here, obviously we'd work with other sports to see how we can really grow the sports sector in Auckland. But at this stage, it's just trying to work out where we're going to be next year.
Steph, you're in an office environment with other player associations, including rugby, cricket, football, hockey. Are you sharing resources?
Oh, absolutely. I think we probably need to, but in terms of COVID and everything that's happened, that's been the gold, I guess, in our office. We've been able to share plans around return to play protocols, around different competition ideas, and while the sports are different on different scales, I think, there's some lessons and learnings that we've taken from the winter sports that then will go into the cricket and summer sports. So on a day-to-day basis, we're continuing to kind of talk and get new ideas.
Don, you've been a former chair of New Zealand Netball and on the board of Sport New Zealand. You're currently on the board of NZ Cricket. You've been there for yonks, so you're across multiple sports. Is COVID a catalyst for looking at different ways of doing things?
Yes. Well, if it's not, then we're wasting it, frankly. I think to give Sport New Zealand credit, I think they know that as well, and they are working really hard at bringing the national sports organisations together and looking at efficiencies, looking at new ways of doing things. I think they've really only scratched the surface of it at the moment. For my life of me, I can't understand why so many national sports bodies have their own marketing manager and their own finance manager and their own marketing unit, advertising unit, and so on and so forth. Some of them on incredibly small budgets. So, but we're fiercely independent, and we haven't really come to terms with the fact that that's just not an efficient way to do things. So I hope, in that space we can get a lot more efficient. As I said, I think Sport New Zealand are starting to lead that now. COVID presents that opportunity, I think.
And Steph, that's an interesting point. You look across the Tasman to what's happening in netball, aligning themselves to AFL clubs, for instance, and there is those sharing of marketing resources and extra admin resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to look inwards before we look outwards. And I think even within sports, there's a lot more we can do across aligning roles and responsibilities across different organisations, both regionally and the national body. But then also looking across sport, like Don just mentioned, and actually how can we, as professional sports, share facilities? How can we go, use the same training hubs? How can we share shared services and things like that? So I understand the conversations happening. I guess it just requires a few people, I guess, sometimes to let go of a little bit of control at times and actually probably be able to merge or work with other people.
Cameron, looking at some of the other challenges we're facing, are we catering as an elite sport for instance, a growing multicultural city? Particularly, I guess, rugby league's been a draw card for the Polynesian community in particular.
Yeah, I think we are. I think all sports should be very happy with where they're trending towards. You know, we're all very inclusive. We do a lot of community work to engage with all cultures. Everyone's welcome in most sports and all sports in New Zealand that I can see. And from a Warriors perspective, you know, we do a lot in those communities. You know, we Pacific Islanders and Kiwis, I think they're about 45% of the NRL playing group. So, you know, there's a lot of work that we can do better, and I know there's a lot of plans in place. We've just engaged Phil Gould as a consultant to the club who's going to focus on those pathways, and I think we can really exploit you know, the communities that have an interest in sport and, you know, try and steer them towards rugby league if they've got interest and give them the correct pathway to get there. So I think across the board we all play a major role in inspiring young kids from all cultures to play our sports.
Don, just putting on a New Zealand cricket hat for a second.
Yep.
Understand that like 40% of senior cricketers in Auckland are either from the subcontinent, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lankan origin. So, I mean, understanding them, reflecting their culture, what can we do in that space?
Yeah, look, I think Dean, cricket put its hand up about 3 years ago and said it's not performed well enough in that space, both in terms of diversity and also in terms of our connection to women in cricket. So if you look at New Zealand cricket in the last 3 years, put a huge amount of emphasis and investment in both the women's game and in connecting more deeply with our community. And still well and truly on that pathway. Martin Snedden leads a piece of work with the New Zealand cricket where we're trying to grow re-look at our whole way we get participation in the game. And frankly, cricket had to. Cricket used to very much look at cricket through a cricket club. And little Johnny, invariably, not Mary, but Johnny went to the cricket club on Saturday morning and played in whites and played a traditional game. Society was going past us. So we're in a little bit of catch-up mode with cricket, but totally recognised it and investing heavily in that space.
Let's touch base with the summer sports again and get a feel for some of the challenges that they're facing outside of COVID-19.
My number one bugbear when you turn up to an event is the first thing we do is start telling you all the things you can't do. And it's just so, to me, that's just so wrong. We've got to do the complete opposite. We've got to foster experience.
There's for us a long-term understanding of how we might need to adapt and change around or build what our capacity is in terms of playing and training facilities for an ever-expanding women's program and an age group talent that we're trying to talent ID and bring through, and how do we do that in a city which is not building too much new green space.
I was in Memphis, Elvistown, right, Memphis, and they play football there at the stadium, they play baseball. So they'll play baseball one week, football next. How do they do that? And you go, well, they got the same issues that we've got. They've got labour costs, they've got to grow the grass or something. But they actually make it work because those two sports are committed, and I guess with the stadium committed, whereas opposed to, hey, look, this is the home of such and such, and we always play here.
It's a real buzz term to say we're putting the fans at the centre of everything we do. I want to challenge you on that. When was the last time we actually put the fan at the centre of something we do? When did we make a decision based on what that fan wanted rather than what we all wanted?
And what came through strongly there was putting the fans first and also creating better facilities with women's sport in particular growing substantially. So this is an important juncture, good people, to determine the elite sports facilities that Auckland needs. Throw it up. Do we have them?
Work in progress. We've got good people leading it. There's been plenty of strategies promoted and talked about. Like everything, just improve it, and that'll come, I'm sure.
Yeah, hard one. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt there's a lot of frustration in in the sporting world about our stadium strategy, and that's not a criticism of anybody, because there are so many good people working incredibly hard. But despite all that hard work, you still sort of sense, as a user in the cricket and rugby space, you still end up, years later, still arguing about the same issues. So, from my perspective, do we have it at the moment? No, we don't. And I really hope we can make some progress soon.
Because have we got together in the same room at any stage and started to work out what we do need, like different sports? Has that been something that has been looked at in the last few years? Has it been touted for the future?
I think the RFA have done a really good job in talking to sports and listening, absolutely. But, you still get a lot of entrenched views in sport. There's no doubt that Eden Park is always the elephant in the room, in the sense that it's a ginormous facility sitting there that needs to be used if it's going to stay, and it needs to be used regularly and needs to be fit for purpose. So, I think there's been leadership, but and there's been consultation. To put it bluntly, we just need some bloody decisions.
Take the handbrake off. Steph, you guys made great decisions around the Auckland Netball Centre out at Nahui. You're on the board of Auckland Netball. How did that come about, and what sort of impact has that had on your sport?
Yeah, it was incredible actually to kind of align the professional and the amateur game. And it came about really, we needed a venue, and we needed a venue that was centralised, that we could bring the teams in and out of for a 6 to 8 week period. And so it ended up at Auckland Netball Centre, which was fantastic. I mean, it got to show Auckland Netball Centre, but also from a user point of view, you could turn up, there was parking, it was easy, it was great to watch, it was great, it was set up really well. So I think that interaction there between the professional and the amateur is beginning, but it's really difficult. I mean, even across sports, from a regional or Auckland Netball Centre perspective, we're just netball, so we need to look wider than that as well, and actually how can we integrate other sports within there in terms of helping out other sports that need facilities. But at the end of the day, it comes down to resource, doesn't it? Like, if you're going to expand or you're going to build something that's bigger, it's resource, and where's that coming from at the moment? It's a really difficult question.
What about leadership? Who needs to be driving this, Cameron, in terms of getting better facilities?
I think we all need to be a part of it. It's a bit political. I think I might just be quiet, but Don might be better off to throw up there. But look, I actually don't have the answer, but I just, like Don said, I hope we get there sooner rather than later, and there just needs to be some accountability with the decision making and get it done.
Yeah, look, it is hard, and at the end of the day, when you're talking about ratepayer funding, it's very easy for us to say, well, putting my cricket hat on, let's throw 15, 20 million and create a wonderful cricket ground at Mount Smart, for example. But that's money that if it's coming out of ratepayers is money that the political leaders of our city are entitled to say there's better use for that money. So it is difficult. It's challenging. I don't deny any of that. But there is just a real sense at the moment that other cities around the world are just going past us at a rate of knots, and that is frustrating.
Yeah, Jim Doyle wrote a really amazing piece on the weekend in the New Zealand Herald, and he said the same thing, that we're taking a rear vision perspective rather than looking ahead. And you look at Dunedin, what's happening there, Bankwest Stadium and Parramatta, they haven't been done for gazillions and gazillions of dollars, but obviously decisions have been made and we've just got on with it. Why can't we have that here?
I don't know, ask the Mayor. As I said, there's competing priorities, and I worry, there's no doubt that the impact of COVID on the willingness of government and local government, central and local government, to take on more debt, to the extent that in a private public partnership there needs to be debt. So I don't think COVID is probably helping this debate either, frankly. But we need our fans watching sport in fit for purpose, modern stadia. We need our players playing in those stadiums. It just so much helps our selling proposition, and I think it'll help tourism. I think it'll help the country. Yeah.
I think there's also, Sir John Key said the other day that we can spend our way out of trouble. and that we're actually desperately looking for shovel-ready projects. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just recap at some of the challenges, because I want to then turn to being a bit more positive. Let's summarise the challenges that have been raised so far by our experts. First off, obviously, coping with the impact of COVID-19. And for teams that are operating trans-Tasman or globally, borders are shut, and then there's the event uncertainty. We're dealing with stretched finances. Don, you talked about potential abyss there. We need to start addressing that. We need to find enough green space to build capacity for ageing infrastructure and for a humongously growing city. And we seem to be falling behind on clever facilities and fit-for-purpose stadiums. We need decisions. And we just have to change mindsets to put the fans front and centre. So, okey-dokey, we've talked about the challenges. Let's get positive. Let's look at the initiatives and solutions that could help professional sport through this awkward time. And Steph, I'll come to you. How are the players' associations batting around ideas to keep their sports healthy and growing?
Well, I think actually from a player association perspective, from the professional sports, we work really well with our national bodies and can work through a lot of issues. To me, it's actually the development or the level below that I think we need some more work put into and some solution focus. I think it's the pathways to get to professional sport at the moment, where we need to come together as sports or across sports to make sure that we've got a pathway that young actually want to be part of these days. And we're looking at a different generation. We can't forget that. Like, these are people that they'll try things a couple of times, and if they don't like it, they'll move on to something else. So we've got to change how we're doing things and make sure that we're fresh and that there's an opportunity there to become a professional athlete.
Hey. And Don, just in terms of the Blues and how you cope with lockdown, I understand that it brought the players and the operations team, the marketing team and whatnot together quite strongly in terms of being put together in this environment, starting to look at things like instead of saying to the players, this is the marketing plan, here we go, engage, they've gone, here are some options, what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, almost a bit like the Warriors. I think you can almost come out of this lockdown COVID scenario a tighter unit. I think the Blues probably managed to achieve that. A lot of credit to our management staff and our coaching group. Certainly during lockdown, the team divided into, team and support staff divided into, I think it was 4 or 5 groups. Each of them had to come up with initiatives in the marketing space around our purpose, our culture, constantly linking through Zoom. I mean, the amount of Zoom calls were pretty extraordinary. And I remember at the end of the lockdown, I came in and thanked the staff and the players for the financial hit that they've taken and the pressure they've coped with. And I said to them, the proudest moment for the board actually wasn't how the 43,000 who turned up to our first game against the Hurricanes, wasn't how fit they came back out of lockdown, and they came back incredibly fit. But I said the greatest thing was actually an article in One News during the lockdown when our players went out to the food kitchens around Auckland. And you saw Bowden Barrett and Patrick Tuberletto and Alex Hodgman and a group of guys with the face masks on delivering food all over Auckland. That to me, that does so much for a club on and off the field. So yeah, I think we've learned a lot and we've listened to our players.
Cameron, you must have embraced tech quite readily this season, being so far away from it. It's not as if you can get in the walker and paddle across to see them every other week.
No, you're right. It's it's been really difficult with the separation of the club. We're trying to operate a rugby league, footy club here in Auckland when the core part of our business is in Australia, playing footy, and then to be separated, and the only connection is through technology. So as Don touched on, Zooms have been a huge part of our lives, but it is what it is. We've really grown together as a club. There's been unbelievable commitment shown to each other firstly, and then to our fans as well. So moving forward, we've just got to be positive and get on with it. There's major challenges in the world, let alone us, and we just want to do our fans proud. And as a club, we work very hard to do that. So that's what we need to do.
What innovations do you think we need to embrace to help professional sport going forward?
I think, I've said it before, on the back of this, I'd love to see all sports in Auckland in particular, where we're based, work together. I think there's huge opportunity. Like we created this year a double header to play at Eden Park, where we're both playing the Canberra-based teams, and you know, it would have been a sellout for sure, particularly with the start these guys had to the season and everything. It would have been awesome. However, that fell over, but that demonstrated to me in particular that how easy it is to work together. They're not competitors, they're partners in sport. So let's grow it for the people in New Zealand, and likewise with netball and everyone else. So whatever we can achieve together, I think it's just better. And I think that's something we can do better together.
It is so refreshing to hear that. And Jenny Wiley, the Netball New Zealand CEO, said in this very stage a month ago, very much the same thing. Even though they're apex predator, they're more than happy to embrace everyone else. Oh,
absolutely. And I think it's, you know, we've got such a small market in New Zealand, we can't forget that. And in Auckland, it's even smaller. And so we need to work together because we can't compete on every angle, can we? So I think, like Cameron just said, around if we can have, you know, passes across multiple sports, if we can align broadcast timings of games so that we can actually have all sports played across a weekend, or we can have timings so that you can get families to games, all that kind of stuff. If you can work together on that, it's going to make sports so much better in Auckland.
Don, you'd agree?
Yeah, totally. I think it's Carl Budge talked earlier about, you know, putting your fan at the centre, and I think certainly in rugby, I think we've actually almost just rediscovered that. Super Rugby Aotearoa, the Aratipu project basically came back and said we've actually forgotten what the fan wants. And the fan doesn't want to see the Blues and the Warriors playing at the same time. And the fan would love to go and watch them both. And the fan would love to see, you know, the Super Rugby aligned with the netball competitions. So, yeah, there's just so much room for us to get better. And I think the really nice thing is that a lot of the people leading sports in this city are keen to work together. So it's an exciting time in that regard.
Well, let's have a final check-in with the summer sports and just hear their hopes for the future.
We're not going to save our way through COVID. We're going to have to innovate our way through COVID. We're going to have to sell our way through COVID. So, you know, we're really excited by that. It's laid a really interesting challenge for us.
Our traditional model is home and away, but I think, you know, going forward out of this, the positive what I think we'll see next year is that we'll have 4 teams or 5 teams will come to Auckland for a week and play, and then we will go and you'll go home and away, and this kind of festival kind of model that I think you're seeing sports evolve.
What can we drive through partnerships, both with other professional sporting organisations, but with tertiary and business, I think, opportunities that actually can grow and educate and build what resource but also knowledge and development we have within our own environment.
Our job at the Tuatara is we're the showcase of sport in the sport, but we're not saying that we're the ultimate. You know, your New York Yankees and your Dodgers, and that's the ultimate where the ultimate athletes are, but you can actually aspire to something that from a New Zealand you see kind of achievable. So that's where we really fit. We also bring relevance to the sport because it's here, it's accessible.
Cricket in Auckland is in a good space. I think we and to touch, I suppose, on that multicultural sort of element and makeup of Auckland, we can't be a decile 8 to 10 sport, and we can't be sitting in the same demographics as we always have. If we're going to be relevant and appeal, both in terms of playing but supporting in every sense of the word, and people engaging and want to be part of our sport, then we have to truly represent what our community and our city looks like.
To me, a good business and a good product coming into COVID is still a good business and a good product coming out of COVID. We're just going to have to make sure we're more resilient and more open to the things that were probably 5-year initiatives are now 5-week initiatives. And I think it's operating at that pace is those that do that well, I think will survive very well.
We heard Carl Budge saying, innovate, let's invest our way to glory. Is this a chance, panel, to spend our way to better infrastructure and potentially a better fan experience?
Yeah, I think so, but that's always been at the forefront of every sports mindset. I think what Carl said there that hit the nail on the head for me was what was probably a 2-3 year plan is now a 2-3 week survival action. So if you can do it, get in and get it done, and let's get on with it. So I think what we're doing now is planning short term, thinking long term, but just action it now for me.
Yeah, I agree. As I said, though, I think the uncertainty of the next year or two means you can't spend what you don't have, Dean. And I think there's a lot of situations at the moment where sports are looking at significant drops in revenue. Particularly if you can't play your international component, and then that impacts on player wages, it impacts on staff, it impacts on the community game because the money flows down. So plenty of challenges ahead.
Steph, how do we address that financial deficit?
Yeah, I think we've got to innovate with COVID, really, don't we? And I think the first step of that is actually for the big sports, it's actually getting international teams to New Zealand, and that's going to set up the financial long term for rugby and cricket and netball. If we can get those teams to New Zealand, then that will be significant. I mean, our sports are based on international contracts. You look at India basically props up cricket. We need them here. We need to play them. We need to get other teams here. And so we really do need support from the government to have a bubble in New Zealand that enables these teams to get here. And then I think that will then be able to set us up so that we can continue to make changes long term.
It'd be nice to get the election out of the way so that it doesn't become a political football and that we're doing things for the right reason. We have 3 World Cups coming up in the women's space with cricket, rugby and football. We need those to happen, don't we?
Oh, massively so. I mean, the Women's Cricket World Cup being put off 12 months, we can cope with that. But, it was a real blow for the flow of the development of the game here. I don't think New Zealanders have a clue how big the FIFA Women's World Cup is. I mean, it was just ginormous. So, yeah, getting the politics all aligned so that we can make it happen is extraordinarily important.
Yeah, I agree. What Steph's saying about the international, flavour in the local domestic arena is important. It's what everyone wants. It's what broadcasters want, and so on. So, the impact of all this stuff not being here is massive. So, I think if the government can get very sensible about what sport does for the country and the impact it can have not only for the immediate future but for the long-term future, for inspiring generations to come. The sooner we get that international participation back on the table, the better.
Regan Wood talked about a festival type event and way of doing things. I would love to see the Broncos, the Raiders and the Cowboys here, for instance, playing each other for a few weeks so that we can have a little stand down period. Is that sort of thing potentially possible?
Everything's possible, but I think that's not going to happen. Look, I don't know. I think we all need to get creative, but until the government look at the border situation, no one's going to go near it, to be honest. So, why would a team leave a free-flowing environment to being restricted without the facilities that Steph talks about? So you just got to get really smart and creative about it and get over it and get the borders under control and let's go.
So just on that then, who's talking to the government and making sure that these things are happening? Is it a Sport New Zealand-led thing? Is it sports coming together to try and funnel it up?
Well, I think in terms of I don't include rugby league in this simply because the Kiwis have decided not to play this year, so that's the only reason they're not in this conversation for this occasion. But there's no doubt New Zealand Rugby, New Zealand Cricket and Netball New Zealand are all working together to try, with the government and with Sport NZ and with the players' associations, to try to get international sport here in a way, and so to create a bubble that the government can live with and consider safe. So, yeah, a lot of cooperation, but there's clearly challenges. I can understand why the government's nervous about it as well, so we can just cross our fingers and toes and hope it gets over the line.
Well, they don't have to reinvent anything. Like, just go and look at the NRL. There's, 200 players playing every weekend, and COVID hasn't hit. Like, it's not that hard, to be honest with you. So create the bubbles you're talking about, get the international teams here, you can control those people. And they're willing to be controlled in those environments in order to play international sport. So the AFL are doing it. They just relocated 400 people to Queensland. Like, it's out there, the blueprint. It's not, it's not that hard.
And Steph, good to see that sports are talking to the collaborating and talking with government. We need that to continue, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, conversations have been going on for a while now around it. So there is definitely the collaboration there to try, and get the teams out here. But I just, I think the financial implications of not getting them here are going to be significant. And I understand there's a balance between New Zealanders coming back to New Zealand and isolation facilities and our health system. But I think, just the impact and the financial impact, if we can't, it's not just going to hurt professional sport, it'll hurt the amateur and the community game as well if we can't get them here.
Trickle down. Well, recap time. Let's have a look at the potential action points that have been raised today. What have we got? We're going to innovate and embrace better ways of operating, evolve business models to be more nimble and operate at pace, like Carl said. Put the fan at the centre of all planning and initiatives. Involve your players. It sounds like what the Blues have done has been outstanding. Don't delay on determining infrastructure needs and future-proofing stadium assets. Engage with non-traditional partners, those tertiary institutes. Open borders. Get international sport down here as much as we can. I'm sure that there are other action points too that we could have a little look at, including stimulating the economy by investing in the health of our city, sharing that knowledge and resources and aligning different sporting teams and codes. We're all in this together. Embrace new tech. We've been doing it in terms of communication and fan engagement. We have to foster that complete event experience. That's before, during and after, and we have to represent what our community looks like. Look, we're running out of time here, so I'd like to get some final thoughts from our esteemed panel. What are professional sports' key priorities, Steph Bond?
Well, I'm not sure I can talk about professional sports, but in terms of professional players, I think the key priorities for them is they've been able to put things in perspective really over the last 6 months. They've understood that that things happen and their careers won't go on forever. So I think that a really great thing and a priority for players now is actually looking beyond their sport and what happens off the field. And there's some great programs in our office that help with those. But it's actually been a real eye-opener for athletes to understand that they've got careers off the field and off the court, and actually now they are beginning to continue to work towards those and actually have a career that they can transition into post-sport, which is great.
Careers do continue if you're Anna Harrison, though. My gosh, she's coming back again next year. I love it. And women have been doing this, going away and, potentially with babies, careers, and then coming back. It's great to see.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's part of women's sport, isn't it? Having babies and being able to come back and play again. And we've got some great systems and processes and things in place now that can actually enable athletes to do that and not feel like they're coming back in and having to put their baby on the sideline and never see them. It's actually encompassing and actually all together now that we're actually creating an environment where for females, and it's slightly different to a male environment, we're slowly getting there, but I think it just shows that it can happen and we can continue to make it happen.
Building a fan base one baby at a time. Cameron, what are your priorities for professional sport going forward?
Survive. That's the reality of where we're at. We've got no commercial income as we speak, apart from our sponsors and that supporting us through these difficult times. But in terms of ticket sales and the likes, we're out of the country. So, we've just got to work out what the back end of this year looks like and what next year looks like. And the most important thing to me is not lose connection with our fan base, given the fact we're out of the country. So that's crucial. So our identity is still here. We want to be here, but the borders just don't allow us to at the moment.
Look, if the fans are anything like me, we appreciate the sacrifices the Warriors have made this year. I'll be a fan for life, big time, on the back of what they've done.
Send them the bill.
Yeah, life memberships. And Don, you priorities for pro sport?
Yeah, look, I think Cameron described it as survival. It's true, and that's content as well. I mean, So how on earth do we deliver content, achieve content? What can we put before our fans, our broadcasters, our sponsors? So yeah, content / survival is the sort of short-term priority. It's what we're talking about all the time. I think good organisations, good sports organisations are constantly looking at post-COVID as well, though. You know, how do we come out of this ready to burn it up?
And on that, how do we get out of neutral and into fifth gear for stadium strategy? Any thoughts?
Donna.
I think the silence tells you everything, doesn't it? Look, I don't know. I think if somebody had a magic wand, Dean, they'd have waved it a long time ago. I just hope there's a lot of honest conversations and realistic conversations, because COVID will change that debate as well, potentially. And we just have to be upfront, make a decision and get on with it. And I don't particularly even care what that decision is, as long as it's a decisive one that we can all plan for the next 10 years around.
That sounds fair enough to me too. It's just about having a robust, mature conversation, getting people in the room and working out what's best for Auckland. Any other last thoughts before we say a big thank you and farewell?
No, all good.
No?
Thank you.
Thanks to two. Let's shout your lunch. So yes, it's time to wrap up our panel discussion. I'd like to say huge thanks to Steph Bond, to Cameron George and to Don McKinnon for sharing your valuable time and your knowledge. It's awesome to have had you here. Big ups to Regan Wood, to Carl Budge and also Ian Laxon for their time and trouble in laying the platform for what our discussion was going to be. Our chief enablers, our empowerers, our supporters, Regional Facilities Auckland, ATEED and Auckland Stadiums. Interesting to see what they'll be called going forward. Maybe RFATEED, I don't know. And big thanks to the people at Auckland Live, including Francis, Edward and Edmund, who have made this Herald Theatre available, and Andrew Dewhurst, who has been a producer extraordinaire and operating in the control room. Do follow us, good people, on United via Sport. There they are. Give them a wave. We do want to continue this discussion, and we do want to unite communities via sport. So if you can, engage with us on United via Sport on both Facebook, YouTube. We're also on Twitter, but oh my gosh, in New Zealand, seriously, who uses it? So that's it from us. Thanks for watching. Stay safe wherever you are and look after each other, eh? Until next time, love your work.